Hi, everyone. This is Scarlett Johnson, and I'm just continuing our discussion of the new online LGBTQ plus student support module series training. This was just uploaded to the Wisconsin DPI website yesterday. This is the Wisconsin Department of Instruction. The video that we're about to look at is a series of trainings of modules that are provided for Wisconsin educators to view individually, as a group, to use instructionally in classrooms. Not per se, not to play the video in a classroom, but to use the language, the tools, the worksheets. All of that is going to be translated into a classroom by an educator. So without further ado, let's share screen and get back to the interview. And again, we can see here, we have Brian from GSafe and Molly Herman, and they discuss proven ways to support LGBTQ plus students. As I said last time, the language used here is primarily geared towards young students, in my opinion, elementary students. This is language used to introduce concepts about gender identity, sexuality. Really, I've not seen anything dealing with, per se, human growth and development in the traditional sense, like sex education. Realize, though, that comprehensive sexuality education, the abbreviation CSE, that is often encompasses a great deal of many things, not just sex ed. It incorporates a lot of SEL, social emotional learning, and it incorporates all of the gender identity topics. Basically, it is spoon feeding kids gender ideology. So
speaking of that diversity, what if, as presenting on this, or even just in a conversation with a peer or with a student, what if an identity comes up that's not on the model, maybe a word we haven't heard before? How can we respectfully ask about that? Like, can you talk about what that might look like or sound like?
So what they're saying here, previously they had talked about the multitude of gender identities and gender expressions, and that there's a lot of different subsets in those categories. So it's not simply, are you a boy or a girl? The gender binary is, or the sex binary. And it's really important because lots of times if you're debating and you're talking to someone who is defending this, they will say, of course, there are only two biological sexes. I'm talking about gender. In this training, Molly and Brian make it very clear. Oh, no. There aren't only two sexes and there aren't only two genders. They do not make any differentiation between biological sex and gender, and thus proving the point that often those of us at Moms for Liberty try to make. They do not believe that there are only two biological sexes, male and female. They believe that there are a myriad of different sexes. Sexual identity cannot be just classified by your genitalia. And so while they went through and described there's cisgender, there's transgender, there's non-binary, asexual, two-spirit, what at this point they're trying to let you know, but wait, there could be more. A student could come up to a teacher and say, well, I am not any of those. I identify as vampire gender or, some other gender. And if you watch TikTok, it lives on TikTok, you'll see that every day kids are coming up with some new gender identity. And so what is a teacher to do when a kid says, I have a fursona, and I have a gender expression that is that of a cat? What do you do? Well, here's what
someone uses, some brand new word that's just not familiar.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I know that I know that as an adult and as somebody who works with young people, or and also fellow educators, sometimes we're really worried about getting things perfect, and it kind of gets in the way of us just doing the things that we need to do. So I want to assure everybody. So I've been educating about these topics for about 30 years now, which blows my mind. And I'm still hearing and learning about new terms and identities that I haven't heard of before. It's totally okay not to know all the terms, because you won't, right? Like, I'm a professional gay person. I don't know all the terms and identities. You're not, I don't expect anybody, and I think most people don't either.
Yeah, you can't know all
Simply no one does,
identity.
right?
No one.
So what's important though is to be aware of the big concepts, like you talked about, Molly, right? And that's why we're doing this. It's like, we're not going into a deep rabbit hole of identities or terms or different, sexual orientations or gender identities.
A deep rabbit hole.
And it's really just important to be aware that a broad range exists, and to be open and appreciative when someone shares their identity with you. So, for example, a way to be respectful when someone shares an identity that's new or maybe unfamiliar with you, is to say something like, first, thank you for sharing that, right? Thanking the person for trusting you enough to share that information with, because that could have been a big risk for them, and they probably thought a while to share that with you. Maybe not.
I want to make this really clear. There is no identity that's off limits. You simply say thank you. Thank you for sharing. Oh, you identify your persona is a cat. Well, thank you for sharing that identity with me. That's cool. Cool. There are no limiting principles to this ideology. There is nothing that a student can say that an educator should show any negative feelings towards, except for maybe identify as a Republican. Now, that one, they might say something.
In every situation, but in a lot of situations, particularly with younger students. So anyway, so thank you for sharing that and for trusting me with that information. I'm not sure if I understand what that means. Would you be willing to share with me what that means for you? Or maybe, is there anything else you want me to know about that? And you can also pair that with, a question about, is this something that you're just sharing with me to share? Or is there supports that you might need here in school? So really, it's about being appreciative.
Are there supports you might need in school? What identity is that? And are there supports? I'm gonna write. What does that mean? What kind of supports? How far will they go to support these gender identities, considering how limitless they are? And I will bring up, just to show you how limitless they are, a gender spectrum. You can have a gender expression of a rock. So.
And just asking, right? And that's okay to ask. I also want to say, and remember, we have an infinite amount of information at our fingertips, particularly through the internet, right? And we know that the internet is dangerous and has lots of weird things, but there's lots of good information about a lot of the different identities that fall underneath the LGBT umbrella. I just want to point out that not all LGBT people are going to want to explain their identity to everyone who asks, or maybe they don't want to explain at that particular moment because they've already explained it 20 times that day, right? And they're just,
or maybe they have no idea what they're talking about because they're kids, and kids can think that they're Spider-Man. They can think that they're Superman. They think that the Tooth Bunny exists. They think Santa Claus is real. So maybe when a kid is telling you their identity and they don't want to talk about it, it's because they have no idea what they're talking about. And perhaps we shouldn't be playing these kind of mind games with kids.
Kind of exhausted and don't want to talk about it anymore. So we can take it upon ourselves to do a little research and educate ourselves. And we can also let a student know, it's like, hey, thanks for sharing that identity with us. That's something I can definitely look up and explore myself. But if you would like if you'd like to share what that means for you, I definitely am open to hearing that. I'd love to hear from you.
This is Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Paulo Freire says, teachers learn from students. Teachers learn from students. It's not that students learn from teachers. Teachers have to recognize how much they have to learn from kids. Kids are to be treated like adults. Kids, as adults, can give consent. Think about that. Treat them like adults. They can make adult decisions. They can decide whatever identity they are, whatever gender they are. What else can these kids decide as adults? What other kinds of consent can these kids provide to adults? Think about that.
So anyway, so it's just a reminder that we also can do our own research. There's a internet out there. And I do that still frequently, right? I'll hear a new term or identity. I'm like, I'm not sure what that is. I need to look that up.
Can you imagine somebody who's been doing this for 20 years, runs GSafe, and he's still hearing new gender identities all the time? It's kind of messed up. There's a lot of, I think, in my opinion, there's a lot of mental illness right now, and adults validating it, I don't think is healthy.
Great. And I think, what you said is sometimes people just want us to know. And sometimes there might be a little bit more. It might be, I'm telling you that because you said something that didn't sit well with me, or, you addressed that topic of whatever in the classroom in a way that didn't include me. So just don't dig, like you said, don't mind for information, but be ready for maybe, well, I'm telling you that because you said boys and girls and that's not working for me, or this pronoun or something like that. So just being ready for there might be a why that gets shared, especially if we're welcoming and thanking them for sharing. So
absolutely, yeah. And the way that you respond to that, if you're appreciative and humble and acknowledging, that can open up a conversation or a more trusting relationship with a student. And it might be a conversation that they need to have with somebody, and that could be that first step.
Great, thank you.
A conversation without a parent. All of this is, in my opinion, what's not being said. That student needs to find a trusted adult, have a conversation with someone who feels safe. They don't feel safe at home. Their parents aren't trusted adults. And you, as an educator, should feel comfortable and actually have a responsibility to have conversations about gender and sexuality with students. These are kids you don't know, you didn't raise, but you're supposed to sit down and become their therapist as well as their teacher.
So are there any last words on these concepts that you want to be sure that people understand? As you know, we have some other modules on some of the YRBS and other health data, legal issues. So I want to make sure that folks possibly maybe are watching this one first and have as much on the basic concepts as we can before we end this module, and maybe they move on to some of the other ones. So is there anything that you want to make sure that folks hear before we close out our time?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, if people aren't watching these in order, hopefully if you've come back to this at the end, this provides some really good clarification on other topics that were shared. So I think I'd just like to remind everyone of the responsibility as well as honor our public schools have to welcome and affirm all students. And that includes LGBTQ+ students as well as LGBTQ+ families, right? It's not always the student, sometimes it's the family, or oftentimes it's the family as well. The language that we use in our schools really should reflect an awareness and understanding that we have students, we have families, and we have colleagues who are a part of the LGBT community and who fall outside of the gender binary as well. So I think just recognizing our responsibility to be inclusive and how it ties into our job of making sure schools are available for all students and are available for all families. I also think, and I think I touched on this in some ways, but it's important to remember that most of us are aware of our identities. So the identities that we talked about on the Snow Person, we're aware of them at a really early age. As early as around 4 years old for gender identity, and then a little bit older for sexual orientation.
Kids at 4 years old know their gender identity, and if they don't feel like a boy or a girl at 4 years old, they can express that, they can know that. 4 years old. 4 years old, kids are able to make life-altering decisions. 4 years old. I can't repeat it again. The book I brought out last time, Me and My Gender Dysphoria, meant for 4-year-olds. last year, if I would have talked about lessons for 4-year-olds, in fact, when I did talk about lessons on gender and sexuality for 4-year-olds, we were told by those on the woke radical left that we were lying. This was a conspiracy theory. We were making this up. No one's trying to talk to 4-year-olds about these concepts. You just heard 4 years old. At 4 years old, maybe a little bit older when talking about sexuality, maybe 6. 4 years old, we can start determining if a kid is transgender. 4 years old.
And it's important to be able to talk about these concepts in age-appropriate ways with our scholars of all ages, because it is something they are aware of for themselves or maybe for their classmates, as well as for their families. And it's also just discussions that are happening online, on playgrounds, in buses.
Discussions that are happening online, on playgrounds, in buses.
In families. Oftentimes children hear about these identities first from families or maybe from social media or media before they ever have conversations about this in the classroom.
It's called social contagion. Social contagion. They're admitting right now. Kids, they're online, they're on TikTok, they watch a show, they read a book, they're introduced to concepts, and then kids go into classrooms and ask teacher or a counselor about the concepts. Do you see how this all gets intertwined? The justification for talking about these concepts to 4-year-olds is, well, they saw it on social media, or they saw it maybe in a Disney cartoon, or they read it in a book. So the books are on display, age-inappropriate books on display for very little kids in school libraries, in preschools, in public libraries. These concepts are online. Parents aren't watching. Kids are going through YouTube Kids, and suddenly they're talking about sexuality or gender expression, gender identities. The seeds are planted, and then they go into the classroom and talk about it. And then the educators can say, oh, hey, it's not my fault. There's definitely something very eerie going on.
So just recognize this is a germane conversation to students across all grade levels, and we can definitely tailor and adjust the language to make sure that it's appropriate. And finally, once again, I think I said this at the top, but I think it's always just important to remember that all people have these identities, not just LGBTQ plus people. So when we say that we're talking about gender identity, sex assigned at birth, and sexual orientation and gender expression, we're talking about all people. And it's an important conversation for all of us to have. So anyway, I think that's the last thoughts that I have.
Well, thank you so much for kind of rounding that out. I hope that everyone picked up some new concepts today, or at least some new ways to talk about them with students. Sometimes just getting that conversation going, and frankly, having the model, like having something for people to look at to kind of springboard that, I think can be really helpful. So I'll just invite folks that are taking a look at this module to share it with other educators, and then also to check out the additional modules that are available on other topics. We hope that these really serve as little appetizers and bites to get conversations started, but also to really share this information in a digestible way. So thank you so much, Brian, and I think we'll see you on another one of these.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Molly. Thanks, everyone.
Wisconsin Department of Instruction. Then they also have some resources. So we'll do continue. Here are the resources. GSAFE, Welcoming Schools, Gender Spectrum, Amaze, the Trevor Project. Just to give you an idea, let's go to GSAFE. Welcome to GSAFE. Purple hair, rainbow flags. Oh. I can read out loud. Developing youth leadership. You register GSA, register your GSA. This is your Gender Sexuality Alliance Club. You would do that at school. You will be sent a kit. You'll be sent stickers. Events. Host numerous events for educators. Resources. Lots of resources. We can go over that at a different time. So you can get an idea about GSAFE. And then let's see, welcoming schools. Creating safe and welcoming schools. Toolkits, training, gender inclusive resources. There's a lot of information here, I have to tell you. Gender spectrum. This is interesting now. Because of recent litigation in California, Gender Spectrum is ceasing all direct service programming. We'll have to get back to that. That's a whole interesting story. Amaze videos. There are so many videos here. They're made specifically for little kids, and these videos look at pleasure. What is it? They're going to talk about sexual pleasure in a cartoon form to kids. So that just gives you an idea of what's happening behind the scenes. This is professional development training for educators in Wisconsin. Those resources that I showed you, those are resources used in every public school district, in every district across this country. You may have a more conservative school board that is working, or just sane, I shouldn't just say conservative, sane school board that is working to try to make sure the materials are age appropriate and that ideological activists aren't hijacking your district. But the chances are very high that every single one of these resources is available. And the educators in your area, in order to maintain their licensure, they need to do a certain amount of professional development. DEI requirements, diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements are going to necessitate that they sit through modules just like this one. And there's going to be an extreme amount of pressure for them to have their swag, their flags, their poster. Where's your poster? Where's your swag? Where is your sign up for your GSA club? Aren't you an ally? Are you not an ally? And this is really the way that it goes if you talk to teachers. And if you are a teacher and you'd like to share something with me, whether it's off the record, which many teachers, if they're a current teacher, they do, I'd be happy to hear it. My website, you can see on my Twitter handle or Facebook, on the YouTube channel, my website, momsforlibertywi.com. You could go to momsforliberty.org, follow me on Twitter, and keep up to date. But DM me, contact me. If you're a parent and you have some information, or if you would like some help, if you live in the Wisconsin area and you would like for me to come and do a presentation, be happy to do that. There are a lot of great ladies in Wisconsin that are available to help, to support. And if you'd like to start a chapter of Moms for Liberty, that would be amazing. Just contact me. So I hope you all have a good rest of your day. There'll be more of these coming. I think this is a really great way to get this information out to parents and community members. So thank you. Bye.